So thanks for that, Richard. So we have Alex, Chris and Raja and Suntar. Just a quick intro. Alex, do you want to start first?
Oh yeah, I'm Alex Richards, qualified as a criminal psychologist many years ago and fell by accident into IT. I'm Chief Information and Digital Officer for Ibstock plc, who are a building materials manufacturer in Leicestershire.
Good afternoon, Chris Butler. So I am Head of Data and Analytics for HSBC UK. Have spent 21 years with National Australia Bank before joining HSBC for the last 10 or 12 years. So been always in data. And one of the key things is no matter the technology, no matter the structure, no matter the project, the methodology you're using, unless your data is correct, you're not going to be successful.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Raja. I don't know how long I need to do my intro, but 27 years working, predominantly in retail, so Boots, Dixon Stores Group, Rolls-Royce for 7.5 years, and several great colleagues that I worked with in the room. IAG, International Airlines Group for 2.5 years, and now Chief Information Transformation Officer for the University of Warwick.
Hi, I'm sorry, I dashed off, really bad timing. So I'm Tara Walker, I am the CTO for Atlanta Group, we're an insurance group. I've spent my life kind of organisation hopping, I guess, so I worked in retail before that, I was CTO for Motorpoint, who are Derby based. Worked in aerospace, I've worked on the other side of the fence for Cisco and Computer Centre, but now in insurance.
Thank you. So again, we were canvassing obviously those coming today for questions, and I'm sure the first question was, what is your favourite chocolate bar?
Is that a serious question?
Go on.
What is my favourite chocolate bar? Depends what day it is. Probably a Boost.
Boost.
Yeah.
Raja?
I don't eat chocolate. but
I would go for a Twix bar.
I'd have gone for a Boost all day, yeah, I was thinking that, yeah.
So these are very important questions, students. So perhaps we start, like we've covered a few things, but perhaps we start with you, Alex. Like what's keeping you up at night with regards to what you're doing day to day? So
I work for a brick manufacturer, right, so you might not necessarily think it's the most technologically advanced industry, and you'd be right, pretty much. So we and our peers in the market are pretty far behind the curve from a digital perspective. So in some ways that's great, because I know we've got parts of our estate which are too old to be hacked, unless we've got hackers in the 70s that are going to chip in. But no, generally from a cybersecurity perspective, most companies in my industry are behind the curve. They haven't invested over the last 10, 15 years. So for us, we've not a mad rush, but over the last 3 years, we've put a lot of money into cybersecurity. Some of our supply chain this year has been impacted by cybersecurity incidents, during which we've had to take action to protect ourselves against any possible threats from those organisations. So cybersecurity, I think, probably is number one. Not unlike a lot of industries, I imagine, as well. But I think because there's so much underinvestment in our industry, it's even more of a problem.
Just the volume of data that we've got, it's not hard to imagine. The transactions that we have, where is it, who is storing it, the 17 million customers, what data do we have, especially if there's a proliferation. We have 10,000 applications, 54,000 end user computing systems, call it spreadsheets. So that volume of data, how do I protect it under GDPR? Who is using it? Do they have a legal right to use it? Where do they see it, especially if our customer support centres are in India, Malaysia, Scotland, cross-border, Shrems too. And then ultimately, how does the business actually get it to use decisions, make value? So there's a lot to unpack in there, so yeah.
Thanks. And what about you, Raja?
Any academics in the room? No? Great, it's brilliant. So for me, probably three things. I'd say academics, and I'll say that respectfully. I think the academics are fantastic beings and have done some great stuff for the country and for the world. but goodness me, is it quite difficult to drive change in the higher education sector? And again, I know there's a few colleagues around here that work in higher ed. That doesn't mean it's insurmountable, but it is very, very challenging. So that keeps me up at night, because I think there's a level of ambition that the board have versus the ambition the university can accept, and the sector, from the conversations I've had with some of the colleagues, and I see a couple around here that I've spoken to. Second one is infringing on academic freedom. If you're not familiar with that term, you may want to start reading up about it. So I come along with certain views around what we should lock down from a security perspective, and I get told, oh, that infringes on academic freedom. And that's quite a concerning point, because that opens us up to a lot of risk. And as you can imagine, the higher education sector, particularly around research and innovation, is kind of typical playground, if I may say that respectfully, for threats, both insider and through the student workforce. And I think the third one is the lack of investment. I have shared with some of my colleagues here around the lack of investment or digital investment that's been made over the years. Quite a bit in homebrew applications that have existed for 40, 50. So interesting hearing about your COBOL example. I'm running Mark's management on something that was created about 25 years ago, and it is so dependent and intertwined. So I'd say technical debt, cybersecurity, and driving a pace of change in a sector that isn't used to it.
Interesting. What about you, Tara?
It's tough going last, isn't it? They stole all the good answers. I think mine actually is fear of getting left behind. I think technology has always moved super quickly, and actually that has really accelerated, particularly when we look at things like AI. And all of the things that you guys mentioned around technical debt, legacy, fear of change, difficulty in changing, actually, I feel almost like Cassandra complex. You know that the organisation has to change in order to survive and succeed, but all of these things are like an anchor around your neck. So some sleepless nights.
So perhaps we start, next question for Tara first. So what are some of the things that you've been able to bring to the organisation to add value? What can you, is there anything that kind of stands out that's a sort of tangible example of what the work that you've done and the difference it's made to the organisation?
Yeah, so I joined insurance about a year ago, and insurance definitely for me was a bit of a shock. Came from retail, came from aerospace before that, and like I say, on the kind of more technology side of the fence. So actually, I don't think it's technical products or technical thinking or any of those things that I personally have brought to the table. It's been more around dot joining. What is preventing you from changing? They were really not stagnating as a business, but they weren't moving as quickly as they could. So actually, through process, thought leadership, kind of just organising and dragging people in the right direction, we've been able to do a lot more in a really short space of time. Particularly actually around how we service our customers, and being a regulated business, that's obviously super, super important.
This is a tricky question for Roger, given what you just said there, but is there anything sort of tangible you feel already?
Yeah, so one of the aspects of the role that I have is transforming what's called the professional services group. And for those that are not part of the sector, that's kind of your back-end enabling services, so your group business services, GBS, etc., that's HR, finance. And when I joined, the university had been discussing this program for some time and actually didn't know how to mobilise it. So what's been really helpful is taking the executive board through the journey around kind of mapping out the business capabilities, the processes, and then the apps and tech. And we've been able to drive quite a bit of change in a short period of time. The challenge, I think, is I quite like the word you said, dragging people. I feel like I do that every day, but just pushing through some of the bureaucracy that exists and the naysayers. I mean, there is this, and I don't mean to sound all negative about higher ed. It's a phenomenal place, actually, what they do. But there is this, you need to consult with everybody on everything mindset. And it's been quite a fascinating daily debate with some of the academics, which is I won't consult with you on everything. I'll get your input, but that's about the extent of it. So yeah, that's probably been the drive and the pace and mobilising the programme.
What about you, Chris?
One of the things or legacies I'd like to be aware of is data literacy and just getting people to think differently about data. If I said, what's data, I'm sure people would yell out facts and figures. Okay, blah, blah. What data is, it is actually representing a real world event, a person, an activity, or it could be a fictitious event, fraud in banking or whatever. I'm sure the students at the back will tell me there's a lot of data around Marvel Universe. I could get a lot of information. Jack Reacher, that he is in 110 million books. Again, born on the 29th of October 1960 in Berlin to parents. But is he a real person? Would I open a bank account for him? So the legacy I want to leave is data is more than data literacy, data quality. It is actually being curious. Where am I getting it from? What does it represent? Is it accurate? Who's going to use it for something?
Cool. Alex?
So it's really interesting because I've met the chap that was in the final 2 for my role that I ended up getting. So interesting chat in the networking event beforehand. He was IT director at LD, sorry for outing you on that one, but that's where we were. I was working for my Cashies retail group, looking after the delivery and operations division within that group. We're not manufacturing guys, you know, that wasn't what they needed for that role. My predecessor had been with the business for 30 years, had a stellar career, but was focused on changing as little as possible because that's how you keep things secure, that's how you don't get a phone call at 11 o'clock at night to say something's gone wrong. So for the aspiration to bring in somebody that might think differently, digital native, which is a bit of a wanky term, right? But digital native person that's going to come in and only think about digital stuff first, that's the biggest thing I think I could have brought to the role. In reality though, I've got systems that are 30 years old, 40 years old that need updating before I can start worrying about some of the sexier stuff. So there's a pretty long journey to go on to modernise that foundation really before we can do some of the sexier stuff. But yeah, pace probably.
Thanks. I'm going to ask one more question, and I'll just open it up. We do have some more if we need. But start Tara.
Oh, not again.
Yes, we go Tara. What would you say the best advice you can give, or to enable you to kind of get to the kind of top of the technology or data leadership table? What's the best advice you think from all those years that you've learned?
That's a really difficult question because I think I did it by a complete accident. So I can tell you what my journey was. I think definitely as a young person or just someone who's looking for a career change, it's about being hungry, about exposing yourself to as much as humanly possible, not being one of those people that's not in my job description, I'm not interested in that. And exposing yourself to as much as possible across technology. I think we're on a bit of a weird journey actually. I remember back when I started, everyone was in their own little niche. Those teams were in their own sort of silos. Then you got real generalists, and now you've got like a group of professionals, but who are kind of operating as a team. So I think you need a really broad appreciation of everything actually, including not just technical stuff, also the business. So I think it's about exposure, networking, and being curious. That's the most important thing.
What about you, Roger? Because you came from a business, HR business side.
Yeah, I've done a variety of roles. A stint in HR, I've done outsourcing and call centre running and all sorts. So it's quite a difficult one. Probably 2 things I'd probably say. The first one is keep a curious mindset. I don't have the traditional career path where I've planned the roles that I've had, and that sounds a bit risky. When I first had my career coaching session, I was asked to think about 5-10 years from now. Had I done that, I think I'd be in HR. That'd be kind of the route path I would have taken as a HR director. So I'd say stay curious and just keep an open mind. And for the Star Wars geeks in the room, learn, unlearn and relearn is probably what I would say. It's because the evolution of technology aside, if you're going with a fixed mindset, I think you're quite limiting yourself, or I would have limited my career quite quickly. But keeping a kind of an unlearning and relearning new skills has kind of helped me keep abreast of where I can go in the future. So that'd be my advice. Curiosity and learn, unlearn and relearn. The Star Wars reference is Yoda, right? Yeah, just in case.
Chris, over to you.
Brilliant. I was waiting for someone to do that.
I would just repeat those, curious and learning. Add resilience. When things don't go your way, don't take it personally. And then the other aspect of that is back yourself. If you see a gap or where things can be improved, you know, don't just complain about it, actually stand up and say, I can change this. This is what I want. This is how I would do it. And you'll be surprised, in my career at least, I've found people who are willing to take the chance.
This might be quite unpopular, I think, but you know, referencing a little bit of your point in there, I think particularly at the start of your career, you've got to put the hours and time in. Burnout's a big thing. We have conversations at work about burnout fairly frequently, but I'm only hit where I am now because I absolutely worked my nuts off in my 20s. And it feels like a pretty unpopular opinion to say about that, right? But doing extra hours, literally, you know, 60, 70-hour weeks were pretty common, I think, during my mid-20s and later. And I learned so much during that time. It's almost like fitting 20 years worth of work into 10 years. So definitely advocate that, and my life's easier now as a consequence of that. I think the other bit, particularly from a kind of technology leadership aspect, tech is a really small bit of my day. It's the people, which is the difficult bit. You can have the best technology in the world if you've got a team of people that aren't motivated or aren't on the journey with you, don't understand the purpose, don't understand the direction of travel. It doesn't matter, you know, that's the first battle to win. So I think for me as a leader, authenticity is really important. I am who I am. I bring my true self to work as much as I can. Obviously not always possible, but as much as I can. But I take the time to get to know my team properly, understand how they tick and how I can get the best from them as well. So yeah, that's important for me.
Yeah, Alex and I were having a dinner a couple of weeks ago, and we were joking about some of the things that happened to you when you've been walking around conferences, and suddenly, you know, you're on stage and everyone wants to talk to you. Perhaps weren't so much before that. So
It's a bit mistaken for the sound guy.
Yeah. That's what he said. So yeah, no, I have some more questions, but I guess really interested more in the room. You've got a question?
So my question follows on quite nicely, Alex, from there. So as leaders, how do you connect your people to a common cause or purpose to drive the best outcomes for individuals, for the team, and ultimately for your organisations? There's been very little talk of people so far, which I actually find quite disturbing. So I'm just really interested to understand, because it's the people behind the tech, behind the AI, behind the cloud. It's all about your people. So how do you motivate them to be able to drive those outcomes?
So I think it starts with personal purpose. And I've been on this journey over the last couple of years. There's times in my career I've sat and I've taken stock and I've thought, what am I doing with my life? And that probably, I don't know, maybe every 3 years that's happened, and I've had that moment of realisation of where I'm at, what am I doing here? It's really difficult for me to try and instill a sense of purpose in other people if I don't have that myself. And I think that's a journey. I keep coming back round on that. So having a real sense of personal purpose has been really important, and I can speak truthfully to my team about my vision and the reasons why. For us, it's a legacy industry. Deals are done on the golf course. You know, I've got customers that still want faxes, they don't want emails. You know, it's really difficult to try and move things forward. So how do you motivate a team to worry about artificial intelligence when we've still got a fax machine in our sales office? But we can make our staff and our own lives far more interesting, far easier, which frees up the time to look at some of the more exciting stuff. So we've got a real element of purpose for my team at least, focused on let's try and automate as much stuff as we possibly can, which gives us a chance to really move the business forward. And the vision I'm setting for my guys is really focused on us being an industry leader. We can be at the top of that chain, really doing things differently. And whilst particularly generative AI feels like a little bit of a leap from where we are now, I'm really excited when we get there, and it might take us a couple of years to really get massive benefits from that. But I think the hunger from my team to keep moving forward and looking at the next thing is another thing that keeps them going. But, you know, we're at a technology conference, right? So I'm not surprised that people are focused on the technology, but, you know, talking about people, again, that's passion for me.
I would answer that question. There are 3 things that I want or try and instill on the team. The first is the team must understand the objectives that we're going to do this year and how they support that objective. Because if the team's successful, then I'm successful and they're successful. So understand their objectives and understand how it fits within the bigger picture or the strategy. So we don't do anything in isolation to the rest of the group. The second one is on that continuous learning. I will get people in from other areas of the bank to say what they do, whether that's cyber, whether that's technology, whether that's finance, or even Marks and Spencer, First Direct, and how they're using digital journeys. We'll get AI speakers in to tell us what's happening. So that's the education piece. The third one is individually. What does each one want to do? Where are they headed in their career, and what do they need to learn? So try and hire smart people so it teaches everyone. And I've been here in the UK in 3 years, and I've had people gone from my team who were senior data analysts to chief data officers outside of banking and finance, because that's where they wanted to achieve. So take some pride in education and teaching people.
So one of the things I did when I took the role, there was 450 people in my function, as in permanent, of course supplemented by managed service partners, etc. And the first 3 months I spent time to speak to every one of them, because I wanted to know why they chose Warwick, because actually it's a charity, believe it, kind of falls into that category. What's their driver? What's their history? A lot of them, 40% of them had actually studied in Warwick and then found a role in. So there was a sense of purpose to what Warwick's there to do, Warwick University's there to do. And actually connected with them enabled me to identify not only their motivators, but what are some of their frustrations. Because actually as a leader, my role's there to unblock those frustrations. So they didn't feel empowered. They felt the processes didn't work for them. There was quite a top-down kind of leadership approach. And I'm not proud of this. I sit in the exec office in my own office, and I found that really odd, because I'm not a goldfish in my own bowl. So I now sit on the shop floor, if I may use that word, and try and be as visible as I can. And then building up kind of mentorship programs for them so they understand the journeys, because not every one of them had aspirations to grow, but a lot of them did. And me sharing my personal story and talking in a very open and authentic way to the point that's been made has been really helpful. I don't think there's a silver bullet answer to that question. It's about your style and what works. But I do believe, I know it's a corporate term, but kind of servant leadership, I think it's such a critical thing. I don't think I've mastered that at all, but actually be humble and know that you're going to learn as much as what you're going to impart is a way to connect.
I've probably worked in, not where I am at the minute actually, but in quite extreme organisations where people are really demotivated, really kind of at sort of breaking point and absolutely have had enough. So this strategy won't necessarily work in every organisation, but I think actually back to authentic leadership and almost being in the trenches with people. You create a journey, you create a vision, you give people a choice actually. This is the journey, this is the mission that we're on. Are you part of that or are you not? And I'll have full respect for you if you don't want to be part of that journey, but if you're on the journey, I really need your support and I need you to be on it. And actually, I think by being a different leader, for me that's really easy, right? You don't get many, actually I'm not that young anymore, but relatively young female IT leaders, it's just not a thing. So naturally, you are something very different from what they've had before. So they generally tend to believe you when you say, we're not doing that anymore, we're doing it this way. Give me a chance. If you don't like it, there are options, but hopefully I'll kind of prove to you. We've had some real success in that. Where I am currently, it's been slightly different actually, because there've been less extreme sort of upset across the teams, and very similar to yourself, large teams, that it's very difficult to get around everybody. But I found that through authentic leadership and through tying what we're doing back to kind of the business outcomes has really helped. I think technology departments historically feel very, very detached from the business. They feel very subservient, you say, we do. Actually, by connecting them back and empowering them as both business people and technical people, it drives some motivation that maybe was untapped previously.
In the spirit of if we all do our jobs well, then your job is to put yourself out of your job. What is stopping that happening, both in the current organisation and because of your own skills?
Do you want to go first?
I could jump into. Okay, so from my perspective, I'll answer that with a very quick anecdote, if I may. So I was at a conference in London with a number of IT leaders in higher education. First thing, it was quite awful. The 5 of us were all male, and there was a lack of diversity. And I think it's important that we keep raising that point sufficiently enough in these forums. But one of the things that became quite interesting, and I won't say which university because it would be very unfair, but the leader spoke, somebody asked a question about digital and what's the journey people need to go on to be digital natives, if I may use that, or enhance the digital skills. And this individual said, yeah, we need to spend a lot of time educating our academics and our students. And I found that entire sentence baffling on so many points. A lot of our academics, in my context anyway, in research, and the 30,000 students that we have on campus a year are probably far greater at the digital skills than we have available. So I think it's how do you take an end user view to let the end user feed what it is that you need. The student in my universities, they have 6 systems on Welcome Week they've got to access. Well, that sounds awful. When they're actually used to systems where it's just one portal, one access and being able to do it. So what my ambition is to drive more education, well, reverse the education back, if I may, into those that are making the decisions through those that are consuming it. I would describe it as kind of a bit more reverse mentoring the other way, because actually I don't think, well, as I say to the VC many a time, success for me is when you don't need me in the role, and it's just kind of permeated with them.
Success for me is curiosity, education, but a lot more self-service of the data and the technology. So ways that we're using or piloting generative AI is across our call centres. You get a call, someone has a question. So it's usually up to the knowledge of that individual now to answer that question. But with generative AI, we could almost key in that question, and then the relationship manager, call centre staff can instantly see what are our policies associated with that, how is the best way to answer that question, and they'll put their filter on top of that depending on what the customer is, what the mood is, and everything. So in terms of understand the sentiment, which is trying to do away with our jobs, mine specifically would be making sure that people are aware of the data, that they can self-serve in a technology and in a timely manner that they need. And we're a long way from that, so, but that's the aim.
I mentioned we've got a legacy tech stack at our place. I'm not an expert in any of our tech, which is a strange place to be as top of the chain on the technology leadership team. Until we've brought ourselves up into a state which I would be happy to leave behind, I don't think I can be made redundant from there. So the excitement for me really is moving away from some of this mad and, you know, some of the names of technology we've got. JD Edwards ERP system, there's not many people implementing that now. You know, Oracle tell me there's 3,000 customers worldwide. I'm yet to meet one that's made any changes to it in the last 10 years. We've got a Cognos data platform, which, sure, it was solid back in the 70s or whenever it was first kicked out, but I can't hire people to work on Cognos now. No one's interested, you know. So a lot of really big battles to get through. I'm not here because I know that tech inside out. I'm here because of where I think I can take the company from a digital perspective. And I guess final point on that, my role can't just be a tech role. If it's just a tech role, that's it, I've failed. You know, it needs to be a business role, it needs to be commercial. There are commercial projects I've taken the lead on, which have been fascinating, really interesting stuff. I'm still trying to move the rest of the exec from seeing us as a cost centre to be more of an enabler. So that's still a journey we're on, but I'm only going to do that by getting some of the business stuff over the line. So yeah, a long way to go, I think, for us.
I was just thinking about it to someone else in higher education, one of the famous universities, and when he started his new role, they had 17 different room booking systems. You know, I don't know if that's the same in your world, Raj, but you know, that's sort of an alien concept. You know, right? Why not have one? But that's the sort of things you often see. One of the questions.
Hi, I'm just thinking about your demographics, particularly in customer-facing organisations, and the age of demographics, and how are you approaching technology, which obviously provides a lot of business improvement and efficiency, with, for example, my 80-year-old mother who is using online banking and I have to help her on her phone. How much are you thinking about that? And yes, technology does seem we're on this super highway, but there's still an awful lot of people who either can't access it because of ability or financial constraints or learning difficulties. How do you approach those areas?
Do you mind if I take that one first? So we sell insurance, right? And we have brands that focus on different demographics. So if we look at one of our telematics brands, Marmalade, they focus very much on young drivers. So everything we do is portal-based, it's an app, as few questions as we regulatory can ask people in order to get them a quote or to deal with us. They don't want to talk to people. So our contact centre actually is pretty much redundant because that is just not what the demographic wants. But then we also have Swinton, which is aimed at much, much older drivers. And actually, we need far, far more traditional methods of contact with those people. And actually, I was really surprised when I joined that the high street stores didn't actually close down that long ago, which to me as a tech person, I was like, who buys insurance from a shop? But actually, quite a few people. So your strategy has to be different. We were talking earlier, and I know this sounds weird coming from a person who works for an insurance brand, but we were talking about kids and how we need to prepare them for a world that actually they can't survive in the future if they don't have technology skills. Actually, there are a lot of older people who are being left behind and are being alienated by services. And that's fundamentally wrong, actually. So I think all businesses have got some form of duty, actually, to bring their customers on the journey with them. And if we collectively then educate the world, because I do think, actually, they do need to be educated. I don't think a world will exist in 10, 15, 20 years' time that actually people will accommodate lots and lots of different channels for a shrinking part of the population. So education has to be the answer, and that has to be a collective responsibility.
Sorry, just to come back on that point though, but I think regulators might have a different perspective as well. So you look in the regulatory area, like banking and maybe financial then.
I think that's going to be interesting. I mean, who knows, right? I think at the minute you're absolutely right. Accessibility standards, regulation it prevents anybody from not offering those channels. The world is moving so quickly. When we look at the adoption of new technologies like AI, who knows in 5 years' time what a different stance the regulators are going to have. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But my assumption actually is from the trends that we're seeing, I think we're going to see some dramatic changes in that area.
I would add, you're exactly right. The Consumer Duty Act that's coming in by March 25 does require us to identify vulnerable customers, those customers that need to interact with us, and we need to give them the method or the journey, buzzword, digital journey, that they are most comfortable with. And there is still a branch. Over 96% of our transactions are now digitally enabled, but we still need to be able to support those that aren't using digital. We do have the tools for sight impaired or blind, and it's bringing those in and making sure that they're aware of them to actually meet how they want to interact with us and when they want to interact with us.
We've got a warped employee base in terms of demographics, and most of our employees are in the older category. And it's been really strange for me coming in. We don't offer e-pay slips because about 10% of our workforce don't have a smartphone, don't have the internet at home. Really strange problem to have. Never been in that situation before, really. So understanding how we can move things forward and get that digital change in place whilst taking people on the journey. Some of our brick factories, you've got an average tenure across their workforce of 35 years. These are people that have come in as apprentices and they've stayed their entire career working in the same factory. So it's really tough to come through. And whilst I've attempted to canvas some of that workforce to understand how we could bring them on the journey, they don't really want to talk about it. So it's tough. I haven't cracked it yet. We're still on that path. My first stab at trying to solve this really is putting a kiosk in at the factory. We're going to trial this. So for those people that don't have a smartphone or internet access at home, they have a secure terminal that will wipe itself every kind of 5 or 6 minutes that they can access digital assets. But I'm going to need someone to stand next to it and tell people what buttons to press and try and gauge a little bit of interest. So yeah, I don't know. It's a problem, but I've not solved it yet.
I think in EdSec, slightly different. I'll probably, maybe unfairly, so the deputy head that did a presentation at the start talked about, is he there? Hello? Talked about kind of being able to do the whiteboards and push in the whiteboards into the devices, which I think is really great. That technology existed about 10 years ago, right? So I think where education needs to look is way, way beyond that horizon. And one needs to look at it in context. So if I give the Warwick example, about 41% of the students are international. And the average spend, if you don't take in the cost of residency, and that's about 25,000 a year, because it subsidises the cost for UK students. And when you think about carbon neutral and hitting sustainability as big agendas, which candidly a lot of the generation that's evolving have more focus on it, I would say, than probably I did when I was growing up. It is reducing or pushing more into remote learning as a requirement. And I think we've got to, in education, look way beyond what we need to do in terms of leveraging digital tech. So there's 10 universities as an example in the US that are looking at creating the first metaversity, which is how can we use augmented mixed reality. I don't see that debate being had in the UK sufficiently, and we're not having those conversations with tech partners in a big way in that sense. How do we create or positively disrupt the education methodology, the way we do education? I don't think, again, I'm happy to be course corrected by the deputy head, but I don't think it's evolved that significantly in the 50, 60 years. It's evolved in places, but I think that's where technology, AI and other things can help. Sorry, I'm kind of losing me of the point you were asking, but the core part is I think I've got to think, or within the sector itself in the UK, where is it going in the next 10 to 15 years? And the one final example, I was talking, I also have the responsibility of the university library, which is quite ironic. I used to play role play as a kid of running a library, which is quite sad. But and now I run a library for a university, isn't that ironic? But I did some analysis that showed actually a trajectory of ebooks being highly required more than physical books. But if you look at the number of physical books we have in university, if I digitalised every physical book in the library, I could provide every student for the next 7 years an iPad on the point they enrol for a 3-year course. And that definitely shocked a lot of people when I said that at university. So there's a plus or minus 10% in that. But actually, the sector's got to move the legislation to compliance because there's a requirement to keep physical books, believe it or not. But I think they're the kind of things that we've got to disrupt in the EdSec for sure.
I was meeting someone actually in a village called Worksworth in Derbyshire, Simon Bolton, that somebody also used to work with. And I went to park my car, and in front of Worksworth is in the middle of the countryside. Very poor signal. There's this poor elderly man trying to pay on one of these, with the phone. Right, he had his phone. He didn't have the app on his phone. He was trying to download it, no signal. And he was getting physically really, really upset because he had no ability to pay. Luckily, I had the same app already on my phone. I was able to sort of pay, and I remember sort of went over to meet Simon. He said, "Oh, no one ever pays in that car park anyway. There's no one ever checks it." But the point was, this poor elderly man was just really, really upset, and that's just not right, is it? So,
Rich, sorry, I've got a couple of students
Oh, yeah.
who might be being missed in the shadowy balcony.
go ahead, question.
How would you go about encouraging people who are less interested in technology to embrace the changes and possible benefits that it can bring?
I don't think there's a choice. Honestly, I don't think there's a choice, and I think it starts at school, right? If I think back to when I was at school, which comparatively to my peers at work wasn't that long ago, we didn't have smart whiteboards, but we were starting to use laptops and stuff more frequently. My little sister, she's 18 years younger than me. She's just finished her GCSEs last year. She's got an iPad. All the lessons are on digital whiteboards. Everything's interactive. She's got, as the deputy head said, lesson notes being fired over to her at the end of the day, which was great. She is further ahead than most of my IT team at work, and all she's done is been to school. So I'm not worried about your generation as much as I think I am my own team. And that sounds really harsh, right? But generally, you guys don't know any different. I think about my little sister when she was 4 or 5. She was so used to using an iPad. I gave her my work laptop at the time, and she was trying to use the screen, thought it should be a touch screen, and it wasn't. So I think every job is going to involve some element of digital or technology as it goes through. I think my role as Chief Information Officer probably won't exist in 10, 15, 20 years' time, because that will be everyone else's responsibility on the board as well. So it might sound like a really flippant answer, but I'm not worried for you. I think it's great stuff that's obviously moving on in school. That's going to see you through, and you're well ahead of a lot of our workforce at the minute.
Yeah, no, just to echo that, the young people that are coming through just get absolutely disappointed with the technology, the service, let alone how we operate. And I want to take that further, because one of the points was on talent. Actually getting the talent, is possible. My problem is actually having old managers who think they know more than the people who are coming in and want them to think this way, want them to do this way. Part of your career is you've gone and grown because you knew more than the people you were hiring. You were training them. A lot of that's going to change. AI is going to change that. The ability to ask the right questions would be more important than my experience. And I don't think big businesses have caught up to that point as yet.
Have you got a phone? Yeah. Well, you're already interested in tech then. Probably where I'd start. How do you get interested? It's a really, really good question. I think immersing yourself into probably less of the tech stuff that you often hear, and hearing all the depths of cloud this and this application and that application or whatever. If you just kind of focus it on what it can do to help make life easier, or your life easier, it's probably a place I'd start. And just keep curious as you go through it. But yeah, just play around with the stuff that's available. There's tons of stuff available. Probably the wrong thing to teach you. Don't play around with everything. But, you know. Sorry. All right, fair enough. Yeah, but just immerse yourself in it. And the fact you've got a phone, it's just a cliche thing everyone says, doesn't it? The power in your phone is probably more powerful than PCs were about 10, 15 years ago. So you're already playing with tech in one way. Just immerse yourself even further. Just watch the dodgy websites.
Anything to add to that, Tara, or is that?
No, I think exactly what these guys have said, that you'll already be interested in. I do think though, as like technical people, as a career option for young people, how do you get people interested in this as a career? And I think it's from having good role models and having people in this industry that young people aspire to be like. I don't think, unpopular by the way, that has been the case previously. The model of a technology person has not been maybe what young people wanted to be. I think we've got a duty to change that and get more diverse talent into technology.
I have a quick question. How many, hands up, how many in this room still code in their day-to-day job? So I make the point that technology is very much broader than maybe the perception that you're thinking about. Yeah, of course you can be, like Richard started as a coder, but there's lots of variation in the technology world and obviously the data world. You can be a very good project manager, you can be a business analyst, you can be a data analyst if you're into the detail and looking for trends. You've got the insights, you've got security. It's so broad, and there's a lot of, I think, if we were to go around the room and talk about all the different backgrounds, like Patrick over there, Oracle of service management and processing and delivering really good service back to the users within the business. There's lots of different things you can do. My middle brother, when he went to university, he got in. We're half French, and he wanted to use his language skills. He was doing import sales, and it was a bit of a dead-end job, to be honest. And he said, "What? I want to do something different." I said, "You'll be amazing at service management." And luckily, a friend of mine who ran end-user computing at Boots said, "Yeah, I'll give him a go." And his career's really developed on since then. I think there must be some people in Calix in the room that know my brother now as well. But he was able to use his customer service skills to deliver a really good result back to the business. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm just conscious of time. Maybe one more question. I think there's another question from the students. Sorry, James.
Thank you.
All right. Should we take a break there? So when do you want to write back?
Well, one more question.
Oh, sorry. One more, sorry.
It's often thought that kind of neurodiverse or introverted people gravitate towards tech and data. So kind of what's your thoughts on kind of the importance or focus that we put on that, and any tips or suggestions of where you've seen that kind of done well?
I've seen it done really badly. So working for Fraser's Group, which is Mike Ashley's retail group, my first year there, the websites, 55 websites, just turned over £1 billion for the first time in a year. There was 8 people running those 55 websites, tiny team, got a massive budget in to blow the size of the team out and really start to move things forward. The interview process, as I joined that for techies was you sit in a room with the boss of the team and you code whilst he watches you and he tells you if your code's good or bad. Now, for even someone who's not neurodiverse, that's not how you write code. That's not how people work. It's completely artificial, and I'm sure we lost some great people from the process that just said, I'm not doing that again. I don't want to work at a company like that. That has changed now, by the way. But it was a company that's been around for 30, 40 years. That was probably the first conversation we had about changing that process to fit the candidates that were coming through. There is this stereotype of introverted techies who like to be locked away with headphones in and getting on with stuff. And it's true in an awful lot of teams that I've worked in, actually. I worked at Boohoo for a period. Boohoo's owners decided they didn't like this working from home lark. They wanted people back in the office. I had people that were living opposite the office in Manchester City Centre saying, no, I like working by myself. I get my best work done by myself in my bedroom with my headphones in. I don't want to return to an office environment. So I think having, and again, falls into that diversity, equity, inclusion conversation again. Neurodiversity, if you look at populations of true techies, you do see a higher instance of neurodivergence in there. How you account for that, it's ultimately having conversations with that population to understand what works for them. And if you've got a population of neurodiverse people in your team, the likelihood is what works for them is probably going to work for candidates that are coming into your path. So I think speaking to your teams and trying to understand this, I'd say there's a demographic thing in here too. Generally, people under 30 are a lot more aware of this. And someone was speaking to me the other day about this, you know, autism, things like that didn't exist 30 years ago. Well, my uncle is much older than me. 100% is on the autistic spectrum. He's got plates in his house that are on the wall that you can look at, you can't touch. He's got cellophane on some of the sofas in his room that you're not allowed to sit on. You know, you start to track some of the behaviour in here, and just because the terminology didn't exist 30, 40 years ago doesn't mean it wasn't there. So that awareness piece I think is really important, and having speakers to come in and talk about what neurodiversity is and how you can support people or colleagues you've got that are working that way. Just that awareness piece probably is a really good starting point.
Do you think that recognition of it is helping us talking about mental health?
The two are intrinsically linked, right? And yeah, as I said at the start, my background is psychology rather than tech, so I kind of fell into this, but I'm absolutely fascinated by this and how people work, how organisations put themselves together. The mental health aspects, again, we talk about it more now, but the same mental health issues exist that did 50 years ago. I don't necessarily think, and there's a lot of press on this, people are less resilient now, a lot more sensitive. I just think we talk about stuff, we're used to talking about stuff more, and there's a huge generational difference even from my generation down to Gen Z in terms of how open people are about talking about their feelings and things that are stressing them out. Having the language to talk about this sort of stuff is really important, and a lot of people in my generation and generations above that don't necessarily have that language to hand all the time.
I do think as well that tech teams naturally, because it attracts a certain demographic of person, actually you might not have the classic diversity of male, female or race or other things, but actually when it comes to mental health and neurodivergence, etc., actually we are. And most technology teams now are some of the most important teams within organisations. So actually they become pioneers and examples of how you can be successful whilst embracing lots and lots of different types of people. So again, back to, I've talked about kind of duty a lot today. I think technology teams, you know, by telling their stories and explaining to other departments, they're removing some of the stigma, because let's be honest, all businesses care about is success. They want to hire the most successful teams and maybe alienating people because they think they can't be successful with those individuals in their teams. Technology absolutely disproves that fact.
Yeah, I think stigma is a big thing around.
Cool, no, thanks for that. I'm just trying to stay a little bit on the agenda. Amber, what time do we need to come back in? What do you think?
We have 15 minutes.
So let's make it 4:30, shall we? 4:30?
Yeah.
So let's do 4:30. Thanks everyone. Just,